The unexpected reaction. The space station Orion 7 floated silently above a gas giant, its metallic surface reflecting the distant glow of a dying star. Inside, the hum of machinery filled the air as Lieutenant Ava Carter worked on a malfunctioning device at her workstation. She sighed, wiping a bit of grease off her forehead. "Why do these things always break at the worst times?" she muttered to herself. A deep, unfamiliar voice interrupted her thoughts. "You are the human engineer." Ava turned to see a towering alien standing in the doorway. He was Xilari, a species known for their strength and warrior traditions. His exoskeleton gleamed under the station's artificial lights, and his 4 arms were crossed in a formal stance. "Yes," she said cautiously. "And you are?" "Captain Doran of the Xilari warship Varkun," he replied. "My ship needs urgent repairs." Ava raised an eyebrow. Xilari warriors rarely asked for help. They were proud and independent. If this one was here, it meant his situation was serious. "All right," she said. "What's the problem?" Doran stepped forward and placed a small device on her table. "This control unit failed during warp travel. It is vital to my ship's navigation." Ava picked it up and examined it. The technology was different from human designs, but she understood enough to make sense of it. "I can fix this, but it'll take a few hours." Doran gave a short nod. "I will wait." As Ava worked, Doran observed her closely. Humans were fascinating creatures, fragile yet resilient. He had never worked directly with one before. His gaze drifted to a small device on her wrist. It was sleek, glowing faintly with red and blue lights. "What is that?" he asked. Ava glanced at her smartwatch. "Oh, this? Just a fitness tracker. It monitors my heart rate and stuff." Doran frowned. "It looks unnecessary." Ava chuckled. Humans like knowing how their bodies are doing. She went back to fixing the device, using a small tool to adjust the internal wiring. Doran stepped closer, watching intently. Then it happened. Doran accidentally brushed against her wrist with one of his lower arms. The watch beeped loudly. Its screen flashed bright red, and a sharp digital voice announced, "Compatible GE make cheese, DETCT." Ava froze. Doran tensed. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic beep of the watch. "What was that?" Doran asked slowly. Ava's heart pounded. That's not supposed to happen." She yanked her wrist away and frantically tapped the screen, trying to reset it, but the watch wouldn't stop beeping. It kept flashing the same words. "Compatible GE make cheese, DETCT." Doran's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Ava swallowed hard. It's just a machine. It tracks biometric data, but it should only respond to humans." Doran's mandibles clicked in thought. "And yet, it reacted to me." Ava shook her head. "No, that's impossible." The station's AI system suddenly activated, its robotic voice filling the room. "Warning. Cross-species compatibility anomaly detected." Doran took a step back. Cross-species. Ava stared at her watch, her mind racing. This was not normal. This was wrong. Something bigger was happening here. Something she didn't understand. The station's security alarms blared. "Lieutenant Carter, report to Central Command immediately," the voice ordered through the intercom. Ava looked up, her eyes meeting Doran's. Both of them knew. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a glitch. Something hidden, dangerous, and unknown had just been uncovered. And neither of them would be the same after this. Forbidden signals. The alarms blared across Orion 7, red lights flashing along the metallic corridors. Ava's heart pounded as she stared at the glowing words on her smartwatch. "Compatible GE make cheese, DETCT." Doran remained still, his sharp, reptilian eyes fixed on the device. His exoskeleton plates shifted slightly, a sign of tension. "Lieutenant Carter, Report to Central Command immediately. The voice over the intercom was sharp, urgent. Ava swallowed hard, her fingers trembling as she tried once more to reset the smartwatch. The screen refused to change. Doran exhaled sharply. Human. What does this mean? I don't know. Ava stammered, her mind racing. This device is designed for humans. It shouldn't react to you. It shouldn't react to anyone who isn't human. Doran's expression darkened, and yet it did. Ava forced herself to stay calm. Look, I need to report to command. They might know what's going on. Doran stepped in front of her. I will accompany you. Ava hesitated. That might not be a good idea. Doran folded his upper arms. My presence has already triggered an anomaly. Whatever happens next, I must be involved. Or do humans prefer to investigate mysteries blindly? Ava sighed. He was right. Fine, she said, but stay close and don't say anything unless I tell you to. They moved quickly through the station. As they passed other crew members, Ava noticed the way people stared at Doran. Xelari warriors were rare visitors, and most humans had never interacted with one in person. By the time they reached Central Command, Ava's pulse was racing. The doors slid open with a sharp hiss, revealing the circular chamber lined with holographic displays. A group of officers stood around a central console, their faces tense. At the center of the room stood Commander Lutherkane, an older man with gray streaks in his hair and sharp, calculating eyes. He didn't even glance at Ava before barking. What the hell is going on? Ava hesitated, then raised her wrist. The watch was still flashing red. Sir, I don't know how, but my biometric scanner reacted to Captain Doran. Luther's gaze snapped to the Xelari warrior. He narrowed his eyes. Explain. Doran lifted his chin. I did nothing. I merely touched the human's device, and it reacted. A tense silence filled the room. Luther turned to the station's AI interface. Give me a full analysis of the anomaly. The AI's mechanical voice responded instantly. Subject Lieutenant Ava Carter and Subject Captain Doran share a 97% compatibility index in genetic markers. High probability of cross-species biological resonance. The room went dead silent. Ava felt her blood turn cold. That's impossible. Luther's expression remained unreadable, but Ava could see the calculation behind his eyes. AI, compare this data to known records. A few seconds passed. Then, no known records matched this anomaly. However, classified Project H92 research files indicate possible correlation. Luther stiffened. Several officers exchanged wary glances. Ava frowned. Project H92. I've never heard of it. Luther exhaled through his nose. Because you weren't supposed to. The room felt colder. Ava's instincts screamed that something was very, very wrong. She had worked on Orion 7 for 3 years, and she knew when someone was hiding something. What's in those files? She asked. Luther didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to one of the officers. Lock down the station. No one in or out. Ava's breath hitched. Wait. What? Doran tensed beside her. Commander, explain your actions. Luther's gaze was cold. I don't have to explain anything to you, Xelari. Doran stepped forward, his exoskeleton shifting again. His voice was calm, but dangerous. I am not a prisoner on this station, human. Do not treat me as one. Ava placed a hand on his arm, trying to defuse the situation. Sir, please, what is Project H92? Luther hesitated for just a second. Then he sighed. It was a genetic research project conducted over 70 years ago. It studied the possibility of shared DNA between certain alien species and humans. Ava's breath caught. You mean? Luther gave a slow nod. Somewhere in our distant past, humans and Xelari may have shared a common ancestor. The project was shut down after the researchers claimed they had discovered something unsettling. Doran's mandibles clicked. And what exactly did they find? Luther shook his head. We don't know. The final research logs were sealed under military jurisdiction. But whatever they discovered, someone didn't want the information getting out. Ava felt a chill run down her spine. Before she could ask another question, the station's alarms blared again. Warning. Unauthorized vessel AP Puroiching Orbital Range. Unknown Faction. DTTCTE. Luther's face darkened. They're here. Ava's heart pounded. Who's here? Luther looked at her, his voice deadly serious. The people who don't want you and Doran to be alive. The experiment that shouldn't exist. The alarms echoed through Orion 7, their shrill tones sending waves of dread through the command center. Ava felt her breath catch in her throat as red warning lights flashed across the room. Doran's sharp, reptilian eyes darted toward the holographic display, where a dark, unidentified vessel loomed near the station's orbital range. Commander Kane, the AI's voice was unnervingly calm. The incoming vessel has activated stealth countermeasures. Scans are unable to identify its origin or crew. Attempting signal decryption. Ava turned to Kane. Sir, you said someone doesn't want us alive. Who are they? Kane's jaw tightened. If Project H-92 was as dangerous as I suspect, then those involved would have gone to great lengths to erase any trace of it. The fact that your watch activated means you too triggered something bigger than you realize. Doran crossed his arms, his exoskeleton plates shifting as he processed the situation. If these people seek to eliminate us, then they are already too late. We know something is being hidden. Killing us will only confirm their secret exists. Kane exhaled sharply. You don't understand how these people work, Captain. If they wipe us out before we can send a message, there will be no proof left to expose them. Ava's stomach twisted. So what do we do? The AI interrupted. Enemy vessel deploying boarding crafts. Estimated time to docking. 8 minutes. Ava's heart pounded. They were coming. The secrets of Project H-92. Kane moved fast, signaling to his officers. Evacuate non-essential personnel. Initiate security lockdown across all decks. I want a defense team at every major access point. He turned to Ava. You and Doran, come with me. Now. They moved quickly through the metallic corridors of Orion 7, the station vibrating slightly as it engaged its defensive measures. Kane led them through several restricted access zones before stopping in front of a massive reinforced door. A retinal scanner activated, and Kane leaned in, letting the system verify his identity. The doors slid open with a heavy hiss, revealing a dark, classified archive room filled with holographic displays and encrypted data vaults. Ava's eyes widened. She had never been inside this part of the station before. Kane walked to a control panel and entered a long, complex security code. A holographic file appeared in the air, labeled Project H-92. Experimental GENTACTOMPTI research. Ava's pulse quickened as the files unlocked. Text, graphs, and images filled the room. She and Doran stepped closer, their eyes scanning the documents. The first file contained a detailed report from a scientist dated over 70 years ago. Classified entry 412. Cross-species genetic overlap. Our research indicates that humans and the Exilari may have a distant but undeniable biological connection. Genetic markers within both species contain matching sequences far beyond what random evolution would allow. We believe that long before recorded history, there was a common ancestor species that diverged into what we now recognize as modern humans, Ancillary. Further testing has revealed an unexpected phenomenon. When a compatible human and Ancillary come into direct physical contact, their biosignatures react at an accelerated rate, triggering a form of cellular adaptation. This adaptation is unstable and unpredictable. Further research is necessary. Ava blinked. This is impossible. Doran's expression was unreadable. They knew. They knew about this decades ago, and they buried it. Ava scrolled down to the next entry. Her stomach clenched as she read it. Final entry: termination of Project H92. Further experimentation has yielded a disturbing result. The genetic adaptation between humans and Siluri is not limited to passive compatibility. In cases of extreme exposure, subjects have demonstrated physical and neurological transformations. Subject X9, a human volunteer, began exhibiting enhanced cognitive function and increased reflex response. Subject X10, a Siluri participant, developed speech recognition capabilities beyond baseline Siluri limits. These transformations suggest a deeper evolutionary connection, one that was never meant to be uncovered. Project H92 is hereby terminated. All research is to be sealed under the highest security protocols. All participants and researchers are to be reassigned. This information does not exist. Eva staggered back, her mind spinning. They experimented on people, she whispered. Kane's voice was grim. And they covered it up. Whatever they found, it scared them enough to erase all evidence of it. Duran's fists clenched. That ship outside, it belongs to them, doesn't it? Kane nodded. And if we don't act now, we're all dead. The attack begins. A deep metallic boom shook the station. The lights flickered. Warning. Unauthorized breach detected on lower decks. Kane cursed. They're inside. Ava's hands clenched into fists. We need to stop them before they destroy this data. Duran drew his weapon, a plasma blade that hummed to life in his lower right hand. His upper arms cracked their knuckles. I am ready for battle. Kane tapped his communicator. Security teams, defend the archive sector at all costs. If these bastards take this data, we'll never know the full truth. The station trembled again as gunfire erupted through the corridors. The enemy was coming. Ava swallowed her fear. She had been an engineer her whole career. She wasn't a soldier. But right now, none of that mattered. If they didn't fight back, everything would be lost. The hunters arrive. The metal corridors of Orion 7 trembled as another explosive shockwave rocked the station. The enemy had breached the lower decks. Ava grabbed onto a railing for balance, her smartwatch still flashing red. Compatible genetic makeup, DETTTED. The words burned into her vision, a reminder that whatever was happening was bigger than just an attack. Duran, standing beside her, let out a sharp growl. His exoskeleton plates shifted, a sign of tension. His plasma blade hummed in his lower right hand, while his upper arms curled into fists. Commander, the station's AI crackled. Intruders have breached Sector 12. Security teams are engaged, but resistance is minimal. Hostile forces are moving toward Archive Vault 7. Kane swore under his breath. They're after the Project H92 data. Ava's pulse pounded. If they wipe that archive, we'll lose the only proof that humans and Siluri share a biological connection. Duran's mandibles clicked. Then we must move. Now. Kane nodded. Follow me. They sprinted down the corridors, their boots clanging against the metal flooring. Overhead, emergency sirens blared. A robotic voice repeated the warning. Security breach detected. Evacuate non-essential personnel. Ava rounded a corner and nearly slammed into a security officer who was wounded and limping. Blood pooled from a wound in his shoulder. His breathing was ragged. She knelt beside him. What happened? The officer coughed, gripping his wound. They're not human. Their weapons, some kind of energy disruptors, tore through our defenses like paper. Ava's blood ran cold. Not human. Before the officer could answer, another explosion rattled the station, making the lights flicker. No time, Kane barked. We have to keep moving. Duran pulled Ava to her feet. If the enemy is not human, then woe. A piercing shriek echoed down the corridor. Ava turned, her breath catching. Emerging from the smoke were figures cloaked in black armor their eyes glowing an unnatural blue. Their bodies were tall and humanoid, but too fluid in movement, too precise. The way they walked, the way they tilted their heads in eerie synchronization, it was unnatural. They weren't human. Doran hissed. Augments. Ava swallowed. Augments. Cybernetic soldiers, Kane said grimly. Enhanced assassins, half machine, half biological. No conscience, no mercy. The lead soldier raised an arm, revealing a sleek, silver weapon embedded directly into their wrist. With a mechanical click, a pulse of blue energy shot forward. Ava barely had time to react before Doran moved. With inhuman speed, he grabbed her by the waist and spun, blocking the blast with his armored forearm. The impact sent a ripple through his exoskeleton. But he didn't falter. Then he charged. Doran leaped toward the augments, plasma blade flashing. The warriors reacted instantly, moving in perfect formation. Their weapons hummed as they unleashed another wave of disruptor pulses. Kane fired his pistol, taking out one of the augments with a shot to the head. Carter, get to the archive. That data is more important than this fight. Ava hesitated for only a second. She sprinted down the corridor, dodging debris and fallen security personnel. Behind her, she could hear Doran in full combat mode. The clash of metal, the sharp grunts of effort, the sickening crunch of armor breaking. She forced herself to focus. The archive doors loomed ahead, still intact. She slammed her hand onto the security panel, and the doors slid open with a hiss. Inside, the central console glowed faintly, waiting for input. She had to move fast. Ava inserted a data extraction drive into the terminal and started the transfer. The screen flashed. DODUNOADing Pro JC to AH92 RCA5ES. She breathed out in relief. If she could get this data off the station, she could prove everything. Then, a shadow moved behind her. Before she could turn, a cold hand clamped over her mouth. Ava's body tensed. A voice, low and mechanical, whispered against her ear. Your knowledge is forbidden. She struggled, but the grip was inhumanly strong. The augment pressed something against her neck, a device, and suddenly her vision blurred. Her limbs felt heavy. Poison. No, neurodisruptor. Her body refused to move. Her mind screamed in panic. The augment's grip tightened. Humans were never meant to know the truth. Ava's vision dimmed. Her breath grew shallow. Then the augment let go, because a massive clawed hand had pierced through its chest. Ava collapsed to the floor as Doran ripped the augment apart, his strength unnatural, his movements sharper than before. His breathing was heavy, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His eyes, they glowed faintly blue. Ava's mind reeled. Doran was changing. The augment's body slumped, its mechanical limbs twitching before it fell silent. Doran turned to Ava. He looked at his own hands, flexing his fingers as if feeling something new. His voice was lower than before. Something is happening to me. Ava pushed herself up, ignoring the dizziness. Your body is reacting to me. Doran clenched his fists. The files, they spoke of biological adaptation. Ava nodded, her pulse still erratic, and we just found out they weren't lying. The station trembled again, and the AI's voice crackled overhead. Warning. Main power core compromised. Catastrophic failure imminent. Kane's voice came through the communicator. Carter. Doran. We're out of time. Get to the escape pods. Now. Ava grabbed the data drive, shoving it into her pocket. She turned to Doran. Can you still run? His glowing eyes met hers. I can do much more than that. Together, they sprinted from the archive, the station collapsing around them. But Ava knew escaping was only the beginning. Because Doran was no longer just Silari. He was becoming something new, and the universe would never be the same again. Evolution unlocked. The Orion 7 station trembled like a dying beast, its metal frame groaning as emergency sirens howled across the corridors. Fires raged in the lower decks, and the escape pods were already launching, leaving only a few remaining. Ava sprinted through the collapsing station, gripping the data drive like a lifeline. The stolen Project H-92 archives were the key to everything. The truth about humanity and Silari's forgotten connection, the dangerous genetic bond that linked them, and whatever was happening to Doran. Because something was happening to him. She glanced to her right. Doran was moving faster than before, his 4 powerful arms pumping as he ran alongside her. His exoskeleton glowed faintly, as if charged with an energy she didn't understand. His normally golden Silari eyes now flickered with a faint, unnatural blue light. Not human. Not just Silari. Something new. Carter. Doran. Status. Kane's voice crackled through the communicator. Heading to the escape pods now. Ava shouted over the alarms. Hurry. Orion 7's core is collapsing. If you're not off that station in 2 minutes, you're space debris. Ava's lungs burned as they neared the pod bay, but she suddenly skidded to a stop. The last escape pod was already being hacked open by the augments. 4 of them stood at the docking bay, their sleek black armor gleaming, glowing blue eyes scanning the pod systems as they tried to override it. Ava's stomach twisted. If they took that pod, there was no way out. One of the augments turned, its gaze locking onto them. A cold, synthetic voice whispered through its speaker. Target located. Execute the anomaly. The augments moved with unnatural precision, raising their disruptor rifles in perfect synchronization. Ava barely had time to react before the first shot fired. But Doran was already moving. With inhuman speed, he darted forward, dodging the energy blast by inches. His plasma blade ignited, its violet glow slicing through the smoky air as he lunged at the nearest augment. His attack was faster than before, smoother, more precise. The augment barely had time to react before Doran's blade carved through its armored chest. Sparks erupted as its internal circuits fried, and the cybernetic soldier collapsed. Ava's breath caught. She had seen Silari warriors fight before, powerful, brutal. But this was something different. Doran was adapting, reacting before the augments could move, as if predicting their actions. As if his body had already learned how to counter them. The remaining augments synchronized their attack, their mechanical limbs adjusting, attempting to calculate Doran's new movements. They weren't used to being outmatched. Doran exhaled, a low growl in his throat. His exoskeleton cracked, small blue veins of energy pulsing beneath his plates. His voice came out lower. Your calculations are wrong. Then he attacked again. Faster, stronger, unstoppable. Doran tore through the augments, moving like something beyond Silari, beyond human combat ability. He anticipated their shots before they fired, dodging as if his reflexes had been rewired. His upper arms struck with crushing force, sending an augment flying into the wall, while his lower arms spun his plasma blade in a brutal arc, slicing through the last enemy. Within seconds, the fight was over. The augments were dead. Ava stood frozen, gripping the data drive tightly. Doran turned to her, his glowing blue eyes locked onto hers. The faint energy beneath his exoskeleton pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Ava took a slow step forward. Doran, what's happening to you? Doran looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers as if they no longer felt like his own. His voice came out uncertain. I don't know. Ava swallowed. Is it because of me? Doran hesitated. Then he nodded. When I touched your device, something inside me changed. And it hasn't stopped changing. Ava's stomach twisted. The Project H-92 reports had mentioned a genetic adaptation, how direct contact between compatible human and Silari subjects triggered a biological reaction. But no one had known what it actually did. And now they were seeing the results. Ava shook herself. We need to get off this station. Now, Doran clenched his jaw and ripped open the escape pod doors. The emergency lights inside flickered to life. Ova jumped in first, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. She fired up the controls, hands moving fast across the panels. Powering engines. Get in. Doran hesitated, his body still pulsing with unfamiliar energy. Then, he climbed in, sealing the hatch behind him. Ova slammed the launch controls. The escape pod ejected. They shot away from Orion 7, just as the station's reactor collapsed. A massive explosion ripped through space, sending shockwaves in every direction. The pod spun wildly, alarms blaring as Eva fought for control. Finally, silence. The station was gone. Eva exhaled, staring out the pod's small window as debris drifted in the void. Doran was silent beside her, still staring at his hands. Ava's voice was quiet. "Are you okay?" Doran didn't answer for a long moment. Then, "I don't think I am the same anymore." Ava met his gaze. The blue glow in his eyes hadn't faded. Something inside Doran had changed forever. And they had no idea what it meant. The final revelation. The escape pod drifted silently through the endless black void of space. The distant remains of Orion 7 flickered in the background, a dying ember in the vast nothingness. Ava sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands gripping the console as she ran diagnostic scans. The pod's oxygen levels were stable, the navigation system functional, and they were heading toward the nearest neutral space station, Vega 9. But none of that mattered, because the real problem sat beside her. Doran. He was no longer just Silari. Ava glanced at him cautiously. He was staring at his hands, his claws flexing, his exoskeleton pulsing with the faintest blue glow. His golden Silari eyes, once sharp and focused, now flickered with an unnatural light. He was changing, and neither of them knew what that meant. "Doran," she said hesitantly, "how do you feel?" He exhaled slowly. "I feel aware." Ava frowned. "Aware of what?" Doran turned his head toward her, and for the first time, she realized his expression was different. More human. "I can sense things I shouldn't be able to." Ava swallowed. "Like what?" Doran's gaze locked onto her. "You." Ava stiffened. Doran's voice was lower now, softer, yet somehow deeper. "I can hear your heartbeat, Ava. I can feel your emotions before you speak them. And I can sense." He trailed off, looking at his own body, his exoskeleton shifting. Ava felt a chill run down her spine. "Sense what?" Doran clenched his fists. "I don't think I'm fully Silari anymore." Ava stared at him, her mind spinning. This was impossible. The reports from Project H-92 had theorized that certain genetic markers could react when two biologically compatible beings came into prolonged contact. But no one knew what that reaction would do. Until now. Doran wasn't just changing. He was evolving. The hidden truth. Ava forced herself to focus. "Okay. We need answers. The data from Project H-92 is on this drive. Maybe it has something that can explain." The console suddenly flashed red. "Incoming Tyrannosaurus DTT'd." Ava's breath hitched. "Someone's trying to contact us." Doran tensed. It could be hostile. Ava hesitated, then activated the signal. A blurry figure appeared on the holographic screen. The connection was weak, but Ava could just barely make out a face. A human, aged, with deep scars lining his jaw. His voice was static-filled, but his words were clear. "You have no idea what you've uncovered." Ava leaned forward. "Who are you?" The man exhaled, his gaze flickering to Doran. "And you're the first, aren't you?" Doran's mandibles twitched. "The first what?" The man's voice was grim. "The first hybrid." Ava's blood ran cold. Doran's eyes darkened. "Explain." The man sighed. 70 years ago, we discovered something we weren't supposed to. Humans and Silari aren't just related. They were meant to be one. Our ancestors weren't two separate species. They were a single race, until something split them apart. Ava's fingers dug into the armrest. What do you mean? The man leaned closer to the screen. Ava, your smartwatch, when it scanned Doran, it activated something dormant in his DNA. It's not just adaptation. It's reawakening something that was never supposed to be lost. Doran's claws flexed. And what does that mean for me? The man hesitated. Then, it means you are no longer just Silari, and you are no longer just one of them. Doran's breathing slowed. His exoskeleton pulsed again, the blue glow growing stronger. Ava whispered, "He's becoming something new." The man nodded. "And that's why they want you both dead." Ava's pulse spiked. "Who are they?" The man's face darkened. "The same ones who erased Project H-92. The same ones who destroyed Orion 7. They knew about this experiment for decades, and they've been waiting for the moment someone like him." He pointed at Doran. "Would finally emerge." Doran's voice was dangerously low. "And what happens now?" The man exhaled. "They will come for you, harder than before. They will hunt you down, because you are proof that the truth cannot stay buried." Ava gritted her teeth. "Then what do we do?" The man's holographic signal flickered. "You find the lost archives of the ancients, the ones hidden before the war that separated your two species, the only place that holds the complete truth." Ava's mind reeled. "Where?" The man's voice was barely a whisper. "On the dead world of Helios Prime. The hunters return." Before Ava could respond, the transmission suddenly cut out. Doran's exoskeleton flared with blue energy as he stood up. "We need to leave. Now." Ava turned back to the console, just as an alarm blared. "War Arning. Mule to Pil, human identified vessels, DTTCTED. Incoming hostile Lokikon." Ava's stomach twisted. "They found us." Doran's glowing blue eyes met hers. "Then we fight." Ava's hands flew over the controls. "I'm overriding the pod's propulsion. We need to move. Fast." The pod shuddered violently as laser fire tore through the void, barely missing them. Ava's heart pounded. This wasn't over. Not even close. They had learned the truth. And now, the real war was about to begin. A new beginning. The escape pod shook violently as enemy fire streaked past, narrow beams of energy slicing through the void. Ava gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the controls as she fought to keep them from spiraling into the endless black. Doran, seated beside her, was completely still. His body was changing by the second. His exoskeleton pulsed with blue energy, his once rigid Silari frame more fluid, more adaptable. But his golden Silari eyes were gone. Now they glowed a deep, unnatural blue, flickering as though something inside him had fully awakened, and Ava wasn't sure if that was a good thing. Another blast rocked the pod, sending sparks flying from the console. Ava cursed. "We can't take much more of this." Doran finally spoke, his voice deeper, richer, almost human, yet not. "Then let me take control." Ava turned toward him, her breath catching. "Doran, you don't know how to fly this." He didn't answer. Instead, he placed his hand over the console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the pod reacted. A surge of blue energy pulsed from Doran's fingertips, spreading across the control panels like lightning. The system flickered, then reconfigured itself, responding to his presence. Ava's heart pounded. What the hell? The engines flared to life. Twice as strong. The pod's acceleration increased, its trajectory adjusting with perfect precision. Doran's expression didn't change. Ava's stomach twisted. He wasn't flying the pod the way a pilot would. He was commanding it. The ship was responding to him, as if it recognized him as something beyond Silari, beyond human. Something new, Arrival at Helios Prime. The enemy ships pursued, but Doran was now in complete control. The pod moved with impossible speed, dodging laser fire as if it had a mind of its own. Ava could barely believe it. Then, ahead, Helios Prime loomed. Ava had heard the stories. A world of ruins and ghosts, a planet that had once been a thriving center of knowledge before it had been wiped from existence. Now, it was a graveyard. Doran's glowing eyes focused on the surface below. That is where we must go. Ava swallowed hard. And you're sure about that? Doran exhaled. I don't think I have a choice. The pod dove into the planet's atmosphere, burning through the storm-filled skies of Helios Prime. As they broke through the clouds, Ava's breath hitched. The surface was littered with ancient structures, vast temples of black stone covered in glowing alien symbols. Massive statues, figures that resembled both Silari and humans, stood side by side. Doran stared at them, his voice distant. This is where we were one. Ava whispered, the lost city of our ancestors. The pod landed near a crumbling temple, the winds howling outside. Ava grabbed the data drive and checked the readings. Atmosphere is thin, but breathable. Radiation levels are low. Doran was already out of his seat, moving toward the exit like he was being pulled by something unseen. Ava hurried after him, her pulse racing. The hatch hissed open, revealing a world untouched for thousands of years. The air was thick with dust, and the sky above was a dark shade of purple, streaked with shifting energy storms. Doran stepped forward, his footsteps echoing on the cracked stone. His blue glow pulsed brighter. Ava followed, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. What exactly are we looking for? Doran turned his head slightly, his glowing gaze unreadable. Not what. Who? Ava's stomach clenched. There's someone still alive here. Doran didn't answer. Then, a deep, resonant voice echoed across the ruins. You have finally returned. Ava spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A figure stood at the base of the temple, tall, draped in ancient robes of silver and black. His face was humanoid, but his eyes were the same as Doran's. Ava's breath caught. Who are you? The figure's lips curved into a knowing smile, the first of what you are becoming. Doran's hands curled into fists. You know what's happening to me. The stranger nodded. Because I was once like you, the first to awaken. Ava took a shaky step forward. Then tell us, what is this? What are we supposed to be? The figure gazed at them, the stormy winds whipping through his robes. You are the bridge between two lost species, the final step in the evolution that was halted long ago. Doran's glowing blue eyes narrowed. Then why was it stopped? The figure's face darkened. Because those in power feared what we could become. Ava's pulse spiked. Who? The ones hunting us. The stranger exhaled, his gaze shifting toward the distant sky. They are already coming. Ava turned just as her watch beeped a warning. Multiple hostile vessels inbound. The enemy had tracked them here. Doran clenched his fists, his glowing energy flaring brighter. Ava reached for her weapon, but she knew this wasn't going to be just another fight. This was the final war over the truth, and they were at the center of it. A new dawn. The stranger looked at Doran and Ava, his expression unreadable. You must decide now, he said softly. Do you run, or do you embrace what you are meant to be? Doran's glowing eyes flickered, his exoskeleton shifting as the power inside him surged. Ava looked at him, at the transformation happening before her very eyes. And then she knew. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about becoming something more. Doran turned his gaze toward the sky, where enemy ships were already descending. His voice was quiet, but filled with power. No more running. Ava felt a spark ignite inside her. She nodded. Then let's finish this. The storm over Helios Prime raged as the first enemy dropships entered the atmosphere. And with it, the dawn of a new species was about to begin. The war for the future had arrived, and they were ready.